Catch the wave. You're listening to Wayvve Radio, your home for uplifting gospel music.
You're listening to the Afternoon Praise Podcast with Demetrius L. Brown.
What's going on, everybody? You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown, and I want to thank you for joining me on this Motivation Monday. Yes, it is Monday. It is the beginning of the week, and guess what? I know you came prepared and ready to stomp the ground. But before we start, though, I want to start today with something I haven't said on this show in about a month. And it's not an apology, it's an observation. And for the last several weeks, I stepped back from recording. And if you know me, you know that's not normal. I don't take breaks easily. I run businesses, I lead teams, I'm building things I care about, and I'm carrying responsibility I take seriously. And on top of that, I show up every day to pour into you, which I love to do. That's who I am. That's what I do. But somewhere in the middle of all that pouring, I noticed something hadn't let myself notice before. I was putting everything I had into what I was building and into the people I was serving, and almost nothing back into the person doing the building, which is me. See, that's not a confession of weakness. That's a leader finally paying attention to something he's been avoiding. Me, I've been avoiding. And here's what I want you to sit with before we go any further. You can't keep calling plays for everybody else while never coming to the bench yourself. I don't care how good you are at the game. I don't care how good you are at business. I don't care how good you are at what you do. You got to sit on the bench to rest just a little. I don't care how much talent you've got, how strong your faith is, how disciplined you are. If you're always on the floor and never on the bench, eventually the game outruns you. And this week, we're calling it sustaining the build. That's our theme for the week. And here's the truth sitting underneath every day of it. God did not call you to build something that destroys the person he called to carry it. That's not a throwaway line, people. That is something you need to look in the mirror and tell yourself. I'm going to say that again. God did not call you to build something that destroys the person he called to carry it. What God called you to carry is not going to destroy you. So today, we're starting with the foundation. Today is called You Can't Build Running on Empty. And before the week is over, we're going to talk about winning that wears you out, growth that outpaces you, recovery that comes before the breaking point, and the difference between resting and quitting. But today we're gonna start simple. We're gonna start with a question a lot of driven people never let themselves ask. What happens when the person carrying the vision becomes depleted? Hey, you're listening to the Afternoon Praise. This is Motivation Monday. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown, here on Wayvve Radio.
Join us on this heavenly journey, one song at a time, Wayvve Radio.
If you just tuned in to the Afternoon Praise, I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown, and we are talking about you can't build running on empty. Yes. See, I want to separate two things for today because most people run them together and it costs them. Commitment and capacity are not the same thing. Commitment is how much you care. It's your devotion to the assignment, your belief in what God put in front of you, your willingness to show up and do the work even when it's hard. Capacity is different. Capacity is what you actually have available physically, emotionally, mentally to do something that you committed to. See, here's what trips up driven people. When capacity starts running low, they assume something is wrong with their commitment. They think, I must not want this as bad as I used to. But maybe I'm losing my passion. Maybe I'm not called to this the way I thought I was. And so they try to fix a capacity problem with a motivation solution. They try to talk themselves into carrying more, praying harder, pushing through, when the real issue was never whether they cared. The real issue is what they had left to give. See, you can love your family and still be too depleted to be fully present with them. You can believe in your business and still be too worn down to lead it well today. You can be completely sold out to your calling and still be running on a tank that's been empty for longer than you've admitted. See, your commitment can still be full while your capacity is running empty. Let that sit there for a minute. Marinate on that. Again, your commitment can still be full while your capacity is running empty. See, that's what happened to a man we're going to spend most of our day with. Not because he stopped believing, but because he reached the limits of what he could continue carrying the way he had been carrying it. And we're talking about Elijah. But hey, we're going into some music, and we'll be right back. This is the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
You're riding the waves of faith and grace on Wayvve Radio.
You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown, and I thank you for joining me here on this Motivation Monday. You know, my show come on from 2 to 6, so if you're listening, if you're listening live, that means you are halfway through the day, and I hope that you are still motivated, but I hope that you understand it's all right to feel like you're drained, because if you feel like you're drained, that means you are probably drained. And that's why the name of this show today is You Can't Build Running on Empty. But let's look at this. See, before we get into the verse everybody knows, I want you to see what came right before it. Because you cannot understand a man's exhaustion if you skip over what he just walked through. See, 1 Kings chapter 18, Elijah stands against 450 prophets of Baal of Mount Carmel. He repairs the altar of the Lord. He prays, and the fire of the Lord falls. The people fall on their faces. Then Elijah prays for rain after a long drought, and the rain comes. And in 1 Kings 18, verse 46, it tells us, and the hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he girded up his loins and ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. Think about the weight of everything Elijah had just experienced. Spiritual confrontation, leadership, prayer, physical exhortation, pressure, victory. See, here's the principle I want you to carry into your own week. Never evaluate somebody else's exhaustion without first considering what they just carried. And we do this to ourselves. You look at where you are right now, tired, short-tempered, running low, and judge yourself against some version of you from a season when you weren't carrying nearly as much. See, people, that's not a fair comparison. See, before you diagnose yourself as weak or unfaithful or losing your edge, ask what you just walked through to get here. And Elijah had experienced the power of God in an extraordinary way, and yet Elijah was still human. Experiencing God's power did not eliminate Elijah's human capacity. Hey, you're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
Bringing the sounds of heaven 24/7, Wayvve Radio.
You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown. Let me tell you, it is enough. It is enough, people. How many of y'all know the juniper tree? See, here's where we land on today's foundation. See, 1 Kings 19, verse 4 in the King James Version. See, it said, but he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a juniper tree. And he requested for himself that he might die and said, it is enough. Now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am not better than my fathers. Sit with that for a second, people. This is the same man who stood on Mount Carmel. And now he's under a juniper tree saying, it is enough. See, I'm not going to put a modern label on what Elijah was experiencing. Scripture doesn't hand us a diagnosis. So I'm not going to hand you one either, people. See, I don't know what you've been through, what you're going through. So I can't diagnose you how you feel and what you're going through. But what the text plainly shows us is a man who had carried tremendous weight and arrived at a moment of profound despair. It is enough. 3 words doing a lot of work. Not, I quit believing in you. Not, I was wrong about the assignment. It is enough. Maybe you've had it. You've had an it's enough moment. Maybe you're in one right now and you haven't said it out loud because you didn't think a person who believes what you believe was allowed to feel like that. See, Elijah said it under a juniper tree with Mount Carmel still behind him. And pay attention to what God does next. God doesn't destroy him for saying it. God begins restoring him. And we got to be honest what we're going through and how we're going through it if we want God to work and restore in us. And see, the Bible said in spirit and in truth, and we got to be truthful with ourselves. Hey, you're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
Bringing the sounds of heaven 24/7, Wayvve Radio.
Hey, you're listening to the Afternoon Praise on this Motivation Monday, and I want to thank you for joining me here on Wayvve Radio. Let's talk about this. I can't keep doing it like this. I can't keep doing it like this. Doesn't mean I quit. See, here's a distinction I need you to hold on to. I can't keep doing it like this is not the same sentence as I quit. See, sometimes the assignment is still right and the method carrying it is what's broken. Sometimes the vision God gave you hasn't changed at all. It's the pace you've been running that's unsustainable. See, sometimes the responsibility is still yours to carry, but the structure underneath it needs to change before you can continue carrying it well. And I want to be careful here, people. This is not permission to walk away from something hard simply because it's hard. Difficult doesn't automatically mean wrong. Most things worth building are going to cost you something. But there's a difference between ordinary costs of building something meaningful and the slow erosion of a person who's been operating beyond sustainable pace. See, I can't keep doing it like this can actually be the beginning of wisdom, not the beginning of surrender. It's that moment you stop pretending the current pace is fine and start asking what needs to change so you can continue carrying the assignment well. See, God didn't cancel Elijah's call. He restored his perspective, gave him further direction, and showed him that he was never carrying God's work alone. The call stayed remained. Elijah called stayed remained. The call didn't go nowhere. The call remained it. But Elijah wasn't going to continue carrying it from underneath the juniper tree. Hey, you're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
Catch the wave. You're listening to Wayvve Radio, your home for uplifting gospel music.
You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown. Let's talk about this. Don't make permanent decisions from temporary depletion. See, right before Elijah runs into the wilderness, Jezebel sends him a threat, and Elijah leaves. Here's what I want us to be careful about. See, scripture doesn't tell us that exhaustion caused Elijah to respond the way he did. So I'm not going to tell you that. But there is a principle here that lines up with what we know about human performance. Sustained pressure, inadequate rest, and fatigue can affect attention, emotional regulation, and the quality of our decision making. So before you make a major decision, ask yourself an honest question. Am I evaluating the situation clearly? Or am I evaluating through exhaustion? Don't make a permanent decision about your purpose from a temporary place of depletion. See, that business decision you're about to make late at night after an exhausting day, that relationship conversation you're preparing to have when you haven't rested properly, that thought telling you to abandon something you spend years building because this week has been terrible. See, some decisions don't need to be made right now. Not because you're avoiding reality, but because sometimes wisdom says, get your perspective back before deciding what the future should look like. You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
Catch the wave. You're listening to Wayvve Radio, your home for uplifting gospel music.
You're listening to the Afternoon Praise, and this is Motivation Monday, and we are talking about you can't build running on empty, and we have been using Elijah for this show. We have been using him, talking about him on this show. And if you miss any part of this show, you can go back to my YouTube channel and you can listen to this show entirely, minus the music. And if you miss any other show, you can go back and listen to that show. But look at God's response here. Now I need you to slow down with me, because this might be one of the most important parts of today's conversation. See, 1 Kings 19, verse 5 through 8. Elijah lies down under the juniper tree and falls asleep. An angel touches him and says, "Arise and eat." There's food and water. He eats, he drinks, he lies back down. The angel comes a second time and says, "Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for thee." And after being strengthened, listen to what I'm saying. After being strengthened, Elijah continued his journey towards Harab. Look at the sequence, people. God doesn't begin by rebuking Elijah. He doesn't start by asking, "What happened to the man from Mount Carmel?" Elijah rests. He eats, he drinks, he rests again, he's strengthened. And then the journey continues. So before God addressed what Elijah needed to do next, he addressed what Elijah needed in order to continue. That's not a small detail, people. The journey was still there. The assignment was still there, but God acknowledged the conditions of the person carrying it. And sometimes wisdom says, before you rebuild everything around you, make sure the builder has enough strength to keep building. You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
Join us on this heavenly journey, one song at a time, Wayvve Radio.
Hey, you're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown, and thank you for joining me on this Motivation Monday. We are talking about you can't build running on empty. See, I want some of you all to stop swinging with a dull axe. You're trying to swing harder and harder, but guess what? That dull axe isn't going to do anything because the axe is dull. Just because you're swinging harder, that doesn't mean it's going to cut through. See, I want to bring in a verse that doesn't get quoted nearly enough in conversation about hard work. Let's look at Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 10. If the iron be blunt, and he do not whet the edge, then must he put to more strength. But wisdom is profitable to direct. See, picture someone cutting wood with a dull axe. They're not lazy. They're swinging as hard as they possibly can. But because the blade has lost its edge, every swing takes more effort to accomplish less. The answer isn't necessarily to swing harder. Sometimes wisdom says stop and sharpen the blade. Think about how many of us are swinging a dull axe and calling it discipline. Working longer hours because our thinking isn't as sharp as it used to be. Grinding harder because decisions that used to take 10 minutes now take an hour. See, pushing through instead of asking why the same efforts that once produced results isn't producing them anymore. See, working harder isn't always evidence of discipline. Sometimes it's evidence that you haven't stopped long enough to sharpen your axe, to sharpen yourself, to sharpen your mind. So ask yourself this: do I really need to swing harder? Or do I need to get my edge back? You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
You're riding the waves of faith and grace on Wayvve Radio.
If you just tuned in, you're listening to the Afternoon Praise, and I want to thank you for joining me here on this Monday morning. You could have been, Monday morning. It is the Afternoon Praise. Man, my mind is just slipped. But I thank you for joining me here this afternoon. Or if you may be listening to the replay on YouTube, iHeart, wherever you listen to your podcast, I thank you for just listening, because your time could have been spent somewhere else listening to someone else. But let's talk about what running on empty actually does to you. See, let's get practical for a minute. See, when demand stays high for a long stretch and recovery doesn't keep pace, it can't start showing up in every ordinary part of your day. Can I say that again? When demand stays high for a long stretch and recovery doesn't keep pace, it can start showing up in every ordinary part of your day. See, your attention gets shorter. Decisions that used to be easy start taking longer. Your patience can thin out, especially with people closest to you. Your sleep can suffer. Creativity becomes harder to access. Strategic thinking gets replaced by simply trying to survive whatever is directly in front of you. See, you know what this looks like practically. It's the leader who reads the same email 4 times and still isn't sure what is said. It's the parent who's physically in a room but realized they weren't really listening to what the child just told them. It's the founder who can put out today's fire but cannot think about next quarter because there's no bandwidth left beyond today's emergency. Or it's the creative person sitting in front of a blank screen wondering where the ideas went. Been there, done that. See, the talent may still be there. The commitment may still be there, but the capacity to access it well has changed. See, your assignment needs your sharpness, not just your presence. Being in the room isn't always the same thing as bringing your best to the room. Hey, you're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
You're riding the waves of faith and grace on Wayvve Radio.
You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown, and I thank you for joining me on this Monday afternoon. And the show today is You Can't Build Running on Empty. Let's talk about why strong people don't realize they're empty. I may be talking to you. I know I'm talking to you. See, here's something worth understanding. Strong, responsible, driven people are often the last ones to notice they are running on empty. See, part of it is that achievement can quietly become identity. When your sense of value gets tied into what you produce, stopping doesn't feel neutral. It doesn't feel natural. It can feel like you're losing the thing that makes you valuable. Part of it is that being needed feel good. I said something a long time ago. You can't always be the hero. See, the people depending on you reinforces that you matter. So you keep saying yes, even when yes is costing something you haven't measured yet. And part of it is simple. You celebrate output. You rarely celebrate maintenance. Nobody throws you a party because you got enough sleep, created a healthy boundary, or said no to something you didn't have capacity to carry. So responsible people can normalize exhaustion. They've been operating that way for so long that it simply feels normal. And sometimes they don't recognize the problem until it starts showing up somewhere they can't ignore. I'm not shaming ambition. I'm not telling you to want less. I'm not telling you to stop working hard. I'm asking you to recognize the difference between discipline and self-neglect. Because if everybody gets the best of you except you, eventually nobody gets the best of you. Hey, you're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
You're riding the waves of faith and grace on Wayvve Radio.
You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. This is Motivational Monday, and we are talking about you can't build running on empty. So let's talk about this. Come to the bench. Come on to the bench. It's all right to come sit on the bench for a little while. It's okay to get your rest. See, you know, I think about a lot of this through the lens of the game, right? Basketball. I go by the business point guard. So let's go there for a minute. See, a point guard's job is to see the floor, right? You're facilitating the offense, getting teammates in position, calling the play, reading the defense, helping the people around you become better. That's what I mean when I call myself the business point guard. But here's something every point guard understands. You don't play every minute of every game across the entire season. Coming to the bench does not mean you left the team. It doesn't mean you stopped caring about the score. The bench is still part of the game plan. From the bench, you catch your breath. You watch what's happening on the floor from a different perspective. You hear coaching. You make adjustments. And you prepare to go back in. You can't keep calling plays for everybody else while never coming to the bench yourself. Because if you're always on the floor, eventually you're not seeing the floor anymore. You're just surviving the next possession. Hey, you're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown, aka the Business Point Guard.
You're riding the waves of faith and grace on Wayvve Radio.
You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown. And let's stay here on the bench for a little while. You know, on the last break, we talked about you have to go to the bench. I'm bringing it from a basketball perspective because I love the point guard position. And that's what I'm bringing it from. So when I'm saying the bench, I'm speaking of basketball. But let's go a little deeper because I'm not simply telling you to take a break. The bench isn't outside of the game. The bench is part of the game. See, a coach bringing a player to the bench isn't necessarily removing that player from the plan for winning. Sometimes they're managing the player's role inside the plan for winning. Translate that into your life, people. A quiet weekend isn't necessarily the opposite of building. It can be part of how you build something that lasts. A real vacation isn't necessarily abandoning leadership. It can be part of responsible leadership. Delegating part of your workload isn't giving up ownership. It can be exactly how ownership becomes sustainable. See, a season where your output looks smaller from the outside may be the season that makes the next 10 years possible. See, we've been trained to think anything that isn't active production is wasted time. That's not always true, people. The bench isn't a break from the plan. Sometimes the bench is the plan. Hey, you're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
You're riding the waves of faith and grace on Wayvve Radio.
If you just tuned in, you're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown. Excuse me. And today we're talking about you can't build running on empty. And we've been talking about the bench. We've been using the point guard position of basketball. And then if you know anything, I go by the business point guard on my podcast, Understanding the Play. So, but let's talk about championships require recovery. See, elite performance isn't built on nonstop maximum effort. High level performance uses cycles. There are periods of intense work and periods of intentional recovery. Athlete trains, they recover. They make adjustments. They prepare. Then they perform again. Because maximum efforts every single day without recovery isn't the same thing as maximum sustainable performance. It may look impressive for strength, but we're not talking about strength. We are talking about a season, a career, a business, a family, a calling, a life. See, championships aren't won by people who never get tired. They are won by people who know how to recover without losing their commitment to the game. And recovery isn't the opposite of commitment. Recovery serves as the performance. It's not instead of the mission. It's part of remaining capable of carrying the mission. Hey, you're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
Bringing the sounds of heaven 24/7, Wayvve Radio.
If you just tuned in and if you got a shout out or request, hit me up on the Business Point Guard on my Instagram. I want to hear from you. I want to know where you're listening from and tell me what you think about the show. If you got any suggestions, any ideas, or if you can have input to what we're talking about, because we know there are people who are listening that are in different areas of life, different careers, different paths, and can contribute to what we're talking about. And we want to hear from you. All right. But let's get into the show. You can't build running on empty. See, self-care isn't the message. Stewardship is. See, I want to make sure this part doesn't get misunderstood. This is not a message telling you to put yourself first no matter what. I'm not telling you to protect your peace at all costs. I'm not telling you to stop the moment something becomes uncomfortable. That's not what we're building today. We're talking about stewardship. God entrusted you with an assignment, and the person carrying that assignment matters to that assignment. Your judgment matters because poor judgment affects what you are building. See, your body matters because your body is involved in the execution. Your emotional stability matters because how you show up affects the people connected to you. See, your spiritual attentiveness matter because you need the ability to listen, receive connection, and recognize direction from God. See, taking care of the builder is part of taking care of the assignment. God isn't asking you to choose between carrying the assignment and stewarding the person carrying it. Stewarding the builder protects the ability to remain faithful to build. Hey, you're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
Bringing the sounds of heaven 24/7, Wayvve Radio.
You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown. Let's talk about sometimes recovery restores your perspective. Let's go back to Elijah one more time. Let's go back to Elijah one more time. I know you probably say, man, he got that Bible deep in here. Yeah, but what I do is God is the foundation, and I do come with a lot of research, but I had to lay the foundation from a spiritual standpoint, okay? But let's look at 1 Kings 19, verse 11 through 18. God tell Elijah to stand on the mountain. There's a great wind, then an earthquake, then a fire. And after all of that, a still, small voice. I'm not going to tell you God couldn't reach Elijah while he was busy and exhausted. That's not what the text says. But look at what happens in the conversation. See, Elijah says he's the only one left. And God corrected his perspective. God reveals there are still 7,000 in Israel who have not bowed to Baal. Elijah believed he was alone, but his perspective didn't contain the whole picture. Sometimes recovery doesn't change what's true. It puts you in a better position to see what's true. Let me say that again. Sometimes recovery doesn't change what's true. It puts you in a better position to see what's true. You may discover that you're not as alone as you thought. The situation may not be as hopeless as it felt. The problem may not require the decision you were about to make. And the assignment may not need to change. Sometimes recovery changes your ability to see the assignment clearly. Hey, you're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
Catch the wave. You're listening to Wayvve Radio, your home for uplifting gospel music.
You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown, on this Motivation Monday. And we are talking about you can't build running on empty. Yes. See, what type of tired are you? I want you to actually look at yourself for a minute. Not diagnose yourself. Just pay attention. Ask yourself this. Do I still care deeply about what I'm building? Has my patience changed lately? With my kids? With my spouse? With my team? With myself? Ask yourself that. Does everything suddenly feel urgent? Even the things that aren't. Are ordinary decisions taking longer than they used to? Ask yourself these things. Ask yourself, has my creativity or ability to think ahead started to shrink? Am I physically in the room with people I love while my mind is somewhere else? I am constantly consuming information or solving somebody else's problem with no space left for my own thinking. Ask yourself these things. One more thing. Ask yourself, when was the last time my mind was actually quiet? and here's the big one. I I tired? I stuttered a little bit, y'all, but forgive me. Am I tired because I don't want to do this work anymore? Am I tired because I don't want to do this work anymore? Or am I depleted because I've been doing meaningful work without enough recovery attached to it? See, those are different kinds of tired people, and they require different responses. If what you experience is persistent, severe, or affecting your ability to function day to day, don't assume you're simply supposed to push through it. Talk with an appropriate professional who can help you understand what's happening. It's okay to go through counseling. It's okay to talk to somebody. See, wisdom includes knowing when something requires more than another motivational speech. And you're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
Join us on this heavenly journey, one song at a time, Wayvve Radio.
You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown, and I want to thank you for joining me today. But guess what? My time is up, man. And if you miss any part of this show, you can go to my YouTube channel or any platform that you listen to your podcast and listen to this show. And I feel great. I'm back. I rejuvenated myself. I went through recovery. So this show was birthed out of what I was going through. And if you listen to the beginning of the show, I haven't recorded live for a whole month because I just had to recover. And this is what I want to tell you. We're not closing today with a 20-step recovery plan. I want you to do one thing, just one thing. Pick a single honest adjustment you can make this week that puts something back into the builder, you. Not just into what you are building. Maybe that's protecting one evening this week. Maybe it's changing a sleep habit you've been ignoring. Maybe it's creating one quiet morning before the noise of the day gets to you. Or maybe it's delegating one responsibility you're convinced yourself only you can handle. Or maybe it's having an honest conversation about your workload. Or moving one commitment that stopped serving the vision a long time ago. Ask yourself, what does the builder need in order to continue building well? You already know what that assignment needs. You've been feeding the assignment. You've been funding the assignment. You've been giving time to the assignment. You've been thinking about the assignment. Today I'm asking, what does the person carrying it need? Recovery isn't abandoning execution. Recovery is preparing yourself to execute again. And I want to close today where we're going to keep returning throughout this week. Isaiah chapter 40, verse 31. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. Pay attention to the movement of that verse, people. They wait. Their strength is renewed. Then they mount up. Then they run. They walk. The waiting isn't the end of the story. Renewal prepares them for continual movement. This was never a message about doing less, people. It was never about glorifying rest for its own sake, people. It wasn't about disengaging from what God put in front of you. It's about sustaining the build. See, Elijah carried something real. He reached a place where he could not continue carrying it the same way. And God did not cancel his assignment. There was restoration. There was renewed perspective. There was direction. And there was movement again, people. And I'm going to say this before I close out. Championships aren't won by people who never get tired. They're won by people who know how to recover without losing their commitment to the game. And underneath everything we've talked about today is this: God did not call you to build something that destroys the person he called to carry it. So come to the bench, people, when you need to. Recover, listen, adjust, and rebuild. And when it's time, get back on the floor, get back in the game, get back to the boardroom, get back to the relationship. Because there's still something God trusted you to build. This has been the Afternoon Praise, and I thank you for joining me. I will see you tomorrow for what? Triumph Tuesday. I'm out of here. Peace.
You're listening to the Afternoon Praise podcast with Demetrius L. Brown.
Catch the wave. You're listening to Wayvve Radio, your home for uplifting gospel music.